homies.
Traveling's been a big one for me.
Mm,
I
good
know
one.
that I've been extremely blessed in my life that I had a dad who really valued traveling, and it's crazy because my dad's story of he started in a hut in the middle of the desert in the Middle East, but I got I grew up and started to realize like, dude, not a lot of people
It's a
travel.
big
Not,
world.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, and to this day, I will say I've never been to Disney World, and I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I want to go to Universal. Like, obviously, it's a
Somebody
plan of
get us
mine.
tickets.
Right,
All the
you know,
homies.
yeah, yeah.
Shout out
But
Disney.
like I had a lot of friends that would grow up and spring break would come or summer break and they'd be hitting the beaches. My life was never really like that.
Right.
Like when I was growing up, I remember my friends would be taking these awesome vacations and like, have you been to Disney yet? And I'm like, where's Disney at? And but
Been to
like I
Israel.
was very blessed with like parents that valued taking us back to the country that they came from, letting us meet those relatives. And at the time, it was great. But now that I look back on it, it was like more priceless than gold to me because being able to travel and traveling with your family is one thing, but traveling on your own as your own person, man or woman, whoever you are, like it's a whole different experience. I remember one of the most, and I'm not going to dive into this too deep, but one of the most incredible times in my life was when I was in Korea in 2019 and my buddy Willie had booked our tickets very wrongly. And we flew out to Korea 24 hours apart on the same flight on the next day. So like he flew out, or I flew out, and then he flew out. But there was a difference in the coming back too. Like I was in Korea for 2 or 3 days after. I remember the person we were visiting there was busy that night, and I was literally on my own. So I was in this country with millions of people just walking in downtown, and I was thinking to myself like, dude, if I just like God forbid just dropped on the concrete right now, nobody would know who I was.
Right.
Nobody would even care. They would just be like, who is this American dude that just passed,
Right.
And that feeling of like, it makes you feel so small, but it also like lets you find out who you are.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's something beautiful about travel that makes you feel small in the best way. I think it just makes you feel human. You see that you're not that important, but it's a good feeling, right? And as far as traveling like with family and going back to sea, that's always, I don't think I appreciated it when I was a kid the way that I do now. Something about going through school is when I started thinking about my parents when they were at my age and like imagining and I started to visualize it, right? But I do remember going to like West Virginia where my grandparents on my dad's side are, like seeing like that's a very like country,
It's a
out of the
different
country
world,
life. Like they were coal miners, you know what I'm saying? So we got
Especially
to see
coming
that,
from Atlanta.
right?
Yeah.
And then on my mom's side, like Honduras, right?
Yeah.
Honduran,
Hondurans.
like you said. Right?
Shout out Honduras.
Shout out Hondurans. But seeing that island life, no, it's good. So I'm excited to talk about travel, especially with some of the guests because we're gonna have guests from all over the world. Honestly,
Sure. Yeah.
that's a great perspective. So if you're out there and you haven't traveled, don't wait to do it. I think
That's a great point.
everybody's just kind of waiting till they have money or waiting till they can do the trip the right way. Man, just go do it. Hop in the car and drive across the country. At least it's a big country. Like the U.S. is huge.
Right.
So start there. That's what you got to do.
And that dude, Jay, that's a perfect point because like I remember, going back to that Korea trip. I remember it was in a season for me that was like the worst time possible ever to travel. Like I remember my grandfather's health was declining
Was a
very
wild time.
rapidly, and I remember my friend Willie would he called me. He's like, "Hey man, this is a once in a lifetime trip. I understand you got stuff going on." And I remember the day that my grandfather passed away, I was like, I got to go on this trip. It was like 9 days after he passed away, and I was like, it's now or never. And I look back on that trip so fondly. Like I grew so much as a person, as a friend, and it changed me. But that trip could have easily never happened because I had every excuse in the book not to take that trip.
Right.
It was a last minute plane ticket, so it was very expensive.
Chunk of change.
It was a chunk of change for sure. And, I had so many reasons not to take that trip, man, but I did. And that's a perfect point because I don't think there ever is like the right time to travel. I don't think you're ever going to find 2 or 3 weeks in your schedule where it's like, oh, I should just fly to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a trade-off. There's always going to be a sacrifice. And I think when you flip that coin, more times than not, you're going to be glad that you did.
For sure. And, you know, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So, like, I'm going to put this out there for people. I typed this whole
You
thing
heard
out.
it here first.
You heard
baby.
it here first. But, I mean, the older I get, the more that I realize I don't actually regret a lot of things in life. You know, even the things that, like, everybody says that they regret, like, oh, I wish I didn't do this and that. The things that I really, truly regret are the things that I did not do. The trips that I didn't go on, the concerts that I didn't go to, just the random opportunity, not random, but the opportunities that came and I chose not to do them for whatever reason. The FOMO, if that's what you want to call it, but it's like, that's the realest thing. The time's going by,
Right.
whether we like it or not, right? So spend the money, book the trip, buy it, like, and that goes into like what we're talking about as far as career and moving into that. Well, and in the season for those of us who are, you know, a few years out of college, just kind of go for it. Like if you see an opportunity, if you fail, you fail, at least, you know, that you tried.
Right.
So when it comes to these trips, go on it. If you got to pay it off later, cool. I'm not telling you to go into debt, but travel, get the experience. The only things you're going to regret are the opportunities that you let pass you by.
True. Yeah, that's a great point, man, because for me, I remember in that trip that I took, like looking back now, I could, no matter how much money I had, no matter how blessed I was with any opportunity, nothing could take me back to that season, right? Where my best friend at that time, that was right before he got married, neither one of us really knew he was going to meet the girl of his dreams,
right,
and get married so quickly, but he did. And now he has other responsibilities and other things that would never allow him to take a trip like that again. So like for me, I've always said one of my favorite quotes is, life's the ultimate teacher. It gives you the test and then it gives you the lesson. And I think sometimes we forget that because life will test you. Whatever entity you believe in, if you believe in God or if you believe in a rocking chair, whatever, I don't care. You know, I think, at least for me, right, that life will send you these mini tests. I mean, sometimes they're like humongous tests that will affect the rest of your life. Sometimes they're just little things, little blessings that could have been in your life. And you take that test, whether you realize it or not, and then life gives you the lesson. And I think we, as humans, we fail a lot of those tests. I'm not saying you're going to knock it out the park.
We avoid the tests, right?
Right. We try to, but, you know, at the end of the day, like, the smart humans, the people who learn from those lessons, that's really where the value's at. You're not meant to make the right decision every single time. Like, every human that has ever lived has made wrong decisions.
For sure.
Some more than others, but if you can take those losses and you can take the times that, like, hey man, like you said, I missed out on a couple trips, I missed out on a concert or whatever, but you use that and implement it into your life, then you learn the lesson.
For sure.
You might have not got the fruit from that lesson the first time, and maybe it wasn't your fruit to get that time either. Maybe the lesson was what you needed at the time. And I know for me, it's like, if I look back at all the times in my life that I took these trips or I didn't take these trips, I still look back at a couple trips that I could have taken before that with him, you know, and that for some reason I didn't take. I'd let, you know, the worries of life or whatever, you know, affect that for me. And I could never get those back, but I did take that one trip. So I learned from it. And from now on, it's going to be a lifelong lesson for me.
Right. And I bet you never regret it either. And that's the funny thing. And, you know, if it's a big trip, I think, you know, nowadays everybody really wants to stay comfortable. If there's opposition, if it's hard, if it's stressful, we think that's a bad thing. But like, something I've grown used to saying to my friends is like, there's no adventure without a bit of peril, right? Like, it's not a real adventure.
True.
If you're gonna go on that trip, you might experience some stress, like you and Willie going and finding out that you're on the same flight, but yours is 24 hours later, right? Getting lost downtown, all the good stuff. I'm sure we'll talk more about that story, but
and we're gonna have to bring Willie on here one day
for sure. Oh gosh. Yeah, man.
You're a wizard.